Okay, hi everyone. My name's Alexis Williams. I'm one of the co-founders of Business Skills for Health Professionals, and welcome to our fourth podcast of the Beyond Clinical Show. In this podcast, I interview health professionals from diverse backgrounds who have moved into unconventional roles beyond clinical. We hear their stories and tips, and I hope that this inspires you to pursue unique career paths. So as I mentioned, this is our fourth podcast, and I'd like to introduce my guest, Raman Khatar.
Hi.
You can say hi, and I'm going to read a little bit about your background. So I will be reading this part for sure. Raman completed her bachelor's degree and dietetic internship at the University of Manitoba in 2009 and went on to earn her master's of public health from the University of British Columbia in 2013. In her 15 years as a dietitian, she's worked in everything from clinical dietetics all the way to supervising international nutrition projects with the United Nations. That was super cool. I didn't know that as a side note. I want to hear more about that. For the past 10 years, Raman has been a retail dietitian with Save On Foods in Western Canada and has taken on a diverse set of roles within the company, including media, marketing, branding, health strategy, category management, and business development. And we were just chatting before this about where we met. We actually met at an Old Ways Retail Dietitian Nutrition Summit in Florida, which I'm going to guess was in 2014 or 2015, maybe, because I knew I had my first son around that time. So it's been a while.
It has. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. So yeah, I just wanted to start off with a little bit of a fun question. What's something that you're excited about? It doesn't have to be work related in the next little while.
Yeah, I mean, I think being November, I know maybe it's cliche, but I just feel like it's like that year-end time that's like really reflective. And yeah, I just find this is the time of year, like December. I love the holidays. I also have a birthday. So it's like when I kind of stop and I'm like, okay, like, wow, what have I done this year? Right? Like, what are all the things that I did? And like, did I meet what I wanted to do in different areas? And then it's like that looking forward, right? Of like,
Yeah.
okay, new year, new slate, like what am I looking forward to next? So um yeah, I just think for me right now, it's like it's entering kind of that reflective stage of the year and just looking forward to what's to come next year. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I find that really helpful, even to do it every few months throughout the year, just kind of do like a
Mhm.
reflection of any personal and maybe professional goals and also to
Yeah,
like reflect on what you have accomplished. I think that's really important
totally.
because sometimes we only think about what we got to get done. We don't think about
Yeah.
what we've done. So,
And we don't do it enough. Like I definitely one of those people that's like when something's done, it's like out of your mind. And
yeah.
like until you stop and look back, you're like, holy, like I did all of that. And like that's awesome. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I love
it's a
that
good time.
practice. I think that
Yeah.
celebration is a really great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd love to jump in and hear a little bit about your career path and your journey as a healthcare professional, as a dietitian into the retail business world and all the other stuff you shared.
Yeah. So yeah, some new information there you learned about my
Hmm.
international work. But yeah, like I think like many dietitians, I started in clinical and I I've like always really appreciated that I started in clinical and had that base of understanding like, okay, like how does nutrition and health look in that kind of acute care world and hospital world. So that was really good. So I went from clinical eventually into public health. And as part of my master's, I was really lucky to go over to Zambia and do work with the United Nations, and more specifically with UNICEF, where I worked on kind of a project around like iron anemia in
Mm.
children in Zambia. So that was really cool. It was like very
Yeah.
research based and obviously taught me a lot of different perspectives on
Hmm.
nutrition and where you can play a role as a dietitian. And then I did a bit more contract work for them when I was back as well in Vancouver. And then, yeah, slowly transitioned kind of into industry and retail from there. So now I've been with our umbrella company is now called Pattison Food Group. So I've been with the company for about 10 years. And when I started first with the company, I was kind of put into marketing and I did a lot of media on camera, so that was new for me as
Ah,
well. Um, and then kind of grew from there to do a bit more of like brand strategy work, started working on some of our private brands and different areas there, and then have continued to just grow, right? And now I'm kind of in the separate health strategy role where I'm working on everything from like business development, program development, and looking for opportunities for health essentially in the company, whether that's
mm,
like from a product perspective, a marketing, customer
mhm.
facing perspective, or like a team member wellness perspective. So I think all those things like have really helped me. Like I can't believe sometimes I've been there 10 years, but I've
Yeah.
always been growing and changing into different things, which is really neat. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, and like,
That's super cool.
yeah, like I honestly, I never imagined I'd be where I am as a health
Yeah.
professional. But like, I know one of the things you talk a lot about, Alexis, is like how we have as health professionals so many transferable skills.
Mhm.
And like, that's a big one for me because when I went into example marketing, I was like, well, like,
Mhm.
it's actually all just like knowledge translation and being an educator, right?
Yes.
Like how we took science of nutrition and converted into something meaningful is
Mhm.
exactly what we were doing with marketing, right? Taking
Yeah.
products and services and making it digestible and meaningful for
Mhm.
customers. So very transferable there. And
Yeah.
then there's just like the basics, right? With like program development or business development opportunities. It's like, well, you're problem solving, you're looking for
Mhm.
gaps, you're doing critical thinking, which
Mhm.
we're obviously always doing as health professionals as well, because we're trying to come up with a solution for a patient, right? We're trying to
Yeah.
fix
Yep.
something, we're trying to figure out how we're going to help them. And I almost feel like business development's
Mhm.
very similar in that way, right?
Yeah.
Looking at what can you
Absolutely.
do? Yeah. And then just like I would say the last thing is like, yeah, as health professionals, generally we go into those positions because, because we care, and
Mhm.
there's lots of empathetic leaders
Mhm.
in with health professionals. So I think that's a big one too that you can bring into these roles is like, you have that a natural ability to be caring and empathetic as a leader. So
Mhm.
I think those are all things like you have them as health professionals and you don't
Yeah.
realize how much they come into play as you take on these roles in business.
Yeah, I love that. I love all those things you said. I think there's so many, like you talked about, there is so much transferability between the skills of being a health professional into business. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that leadership one is really interesting because I feel like this is a time where people really need an empathetic leader.
Yeah.
There's, a lot of burnout and a lot of people are just, it's been a hard time coming out of the last few years, and having those
Yeah.
empathetic leaders that understand wellness, I think is just such an
Mhm.
incredible value for a company. And it may not be something they would have had before in kind of traditional businesses. So
Yeah.
probably quite refreshing for the teams, I can imagine. And
Yeah.
I also thought it was interesting what you said about spending 10 years. I also spent 10 years in a retail role. And I think one thing about retail is that there's never a dull moment. It's incredibly fast paced. So if you like that,
Yeah.
retail is a great place to be. Even though you might be kind of in the same area for a period of time, it is not going
Mhm.
to be the same. There is going to be a lot of change, a lot of leadership change, just like
Yeah.
acquisitions and takeovers and things like that. We've probably both experienced those. So
Yeah.
I think it's a great place if you do tend to get kind of bored easily and
Yeah.
like change and kind of like a faster pace. So yeah, definitely heard when you said that. Um,
100%.
what do you think has helped you on your journey? It's kind of these transferable skills, but anything else that you found really helpful to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like it was obviously daunting, right? To be a health
Mm-hmm.
professional and step into this business world and you're like, wait a minute, I don't have any like formal business
Yeah.
education. So I think for me, it was like one of the biggest things was just like listening and soaking in and learning from the experts
Mm-hmm.
in the retail and more specifically grocery industry.
Yes.
That was one piece of advice someone gave me like right off the bat, like come in, listen, learn, and like
Mm-hmm.
then kind of find your groove and figure out how you're going to bring in your expertise. And it was probably like some of the best advice I had, because I think that's how I, started to understand how do the other facets of the business like work, and how
Yeah.
am I going to fit into this picture, right? So I
Hmm.
think that in general is really good. Obviously, I've had lots of opportunities to take like mini kind of leadership and business courses throughout my 10
Hmm.
years, which obviously contribute really well in just
Yeah.
learning some of that business acumen. Um, and then I think the last thing, and part of this is probably just with experience or as years go on, is like really making an effort to like take a seat at the table, right? Like
Hmm.
step up, volunteer,
Yeah.
take on extra work, take on things that might not even be within your wheelhouse, but like
Yeah.
it makes you a part of the discussion, right? And it
Hmm.
helps you understand, like, okay, so what is happening in the planning, or what is coming up in product development, or what is
Yeah.
happening here, so that you can figure out, okay, where does health play a
Yeah.
role in this, right? And where can I play a role in this? So I think that's a huge one. And I don't, um, it's not one I feel like we're necessarily taught, or one that we're
Yeah.
told like we need to do enough, but
Yeah.
it's a big one.
Yeah, I can relate, especially working in, larger companies. I think it is important to try to maybe have a foot in the door on different areas that you might not think they're going to affect what you're doing, but they
Yeah.
often do. And I think it's good to be part of those discussions rather than kind of things coming down the pipeline and then you're like, oh, let's try and squish a health message into this, or
Yeah,
let's try and make this healthier after the fact. So
exactly.
kind of being earlier on in the discussions, I think, is really valuable. It's a great one. And that, I think you're
Yeah.
right, there is some of that comes with confidence.
Yeah.
And one thing I find, and you said this at the beginning, is listening a lot, but I think what helps your confidence grow is really trying to deeply understand the company and the business units that you work with and what matters to them. Because when you start kind of figuring out what matters to them, you can kind of adapt, how you're presenting things and the language that you're using to kind of um, align more strategically with, the company as a large. And I think that can be really helpful too.
Very. Yeah.
Yeah. What about skills? What would you say are some key skills that you've picked up or learned?
Mm, does patience count as a skill?
Yeah. Yep. For sure.
um, no, but like it's true, right? Like I think one of the things I realized pretty quickly in retail is like there is lots of priorities, right? And
Hmm.
your passion is not everyone else's
Yeah.
passion, right? So like how do you make it make sense for them? And how do you make it make sense for their business, right?
Hmm.
And that was the big, like, to this day, every time I meet with someone, the question in the back of my head is like, how can I help you? Like,
Yeah.
how can I help your business or whatever it may be,
Hmm.
grow or support customers better? But at the same time, I'm helping advance health and wellness
Hmm.
in our company, and within my role. So I
Hmm.
think whether that's a skill or not, it's like it
Yeah.
really is like having that patience to know that, like,
Hmm.
it's going to take time. Sometimes you have to win certain people or areas over, because it's not going
Yeah.
to be the top of their mind, right? And then really relate it back to how it's going to help support them.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great one. The competing priorities is definitely a challenge in larger companies. And I think often with these roles, kind of health and wellness roles within larger companies, you are not always ingrained in the core business and the core operations of it. And that can be challenging because, like you said, you're competing with kind of the everyday running of the business, trying to kind of add in that health and wellness piece to it. But yes, that's definitely, I think, a key skill in this space, especially for a company that maybe hasn't had a long experience with having a health and wellness component or professional working with them. So that's
Yeah.
great. That's a great one.
Well, yeah, and to add on to that, what you just said is like you're not always in the center of like where you are, like literally like where you're placed as a health professional in
Yeah.
this company is like might be so disconnected from like the core
Hmm.
where the core business decisions are made. So that's one too. I find that like a lot of health professionals I have connected with in business is like, it's the constant conversation of like, how can I advocate to have my reporting structure be somewhere where
Yeah.
I'm more involved in the planning, and there's so
Hmm.
many people I know that have, advocate to move from one department to another. I mean, I've done that myself, and
Hmm.
find different ways to fit into like those areas where you
Yeah.
can be more in the center of
Hmm.
decision making. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. I think definitely one that we could probably chat a lot about. What would you say are some of your biggest challenges that you faced kind of being maybe a health professional in business?
Yeah, I think that one kind of almost relates a little bit back to the
Yeah.
last one, right? Like it's like earning health's spot in the retail world, right?
Hmm.
Like how do you, I mean, let's be honest, right now, grocery retail is like the center of a lot of
Yeah.
attention, right? Whether it's good, bad, or worse. And
Hmm.
that in itself just tells you like there's so many things we have to prioritize, right? Like value for the customer and quality and customer service and just these core things to make sure you're running good operations. And so
Hmm.
within all of that, it's like, how do I how do I make sure health has a spot, right? Like health
Hmm.
has an area to thrive within those areas. So it's like, yeah, just continuing to be an advocate, continuing to like relate back to the business. And like, honestly, I feel like so much of it is just like not letting it dull your passion, right? And
Yes,
not, and
absolutely.
controlling what you can. Like
Yeah.
you have to have such a, I think, a resilience in a way, and a mindset shift when you
Hmm.
do transition to the business world as a health professional, because all of a sudden it's never gonna, I shouldn't say never, but it's often in a world like this not going to be the top priority, but it's always
Hmm.
going to be important. So it's like, how do you keep advocating for that without letting
Yeah.
letting the barriers and the challenges like break you down? So yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder if you've something that made me think like one of the ways I found that helpful to cope with was connecting with other health and wellness professionals and other retail dietitians through I know RDBA, the Retail Dietitian Business
Yeah.
Association, just changed to, oh, maybe the Health and
Art.
Wellness
Yeah.
ARC.
Art.
Yeah.
Health and wellness. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I found that was really helpful to me, especially in those early days where I was really alone, because I was starting up a program that hadn't really existed, and
Yeah.
you are quite alone in oftentimes in these roles. There's not always another health professional working in the company.
Yeah.
Did you find that helpful as well?
100%. Like, I feel like it's like anything in life where it's like you find that support group and you're like, oh, I'm not alone, right? Like, and
Hmm.
all of a sudden people start speaking the same language as you and
Yeah.
understanding the same challenges. And yeah, it's like, it's been huge for me
Yeah.
in retail. Because similar to you, like, even in my current role, I am technically the only like dietitian at the corporate office right now. And so it's, when you're alone in kind of that, you're kind of trying to figure out and navigate how you relate and how you fit into everything.
Yeah, so I think if you are working in a business area and you are alone, I would definitely encourage you to seek out any networking groups. That's part of why I'm building this community as well,
Yeah,
is
this.
to
Yeah.
have like-minded across different industries, of course, but to have people that are working kind of in those non-traditional settings as health professionals. And you do run into things that are always like, how would I handle that? And you
Yeah.
sometimes do need that extra support. So yeah. Any any kind of goals you have from a like personal development standpoint coming up for the rest of this year?
Well, the year's coming to a quick end
It
for
is. I
sure.
know I maybe need to reword that one.
Yeah. um, no, I mean, I think like personally for me, the biggest thing has always been like, I look at things like my skills as a toolkit, right? So it's always
Hmm.
like, what can I keep doing that's going to keep adding tools to my toolkit?
Yeah.
Example for me was fairly recently, about 4 or 5 months ago. I had a bit of a lull in projects. I also saw there was like an area of category management that was really short on people. And so I went to my manager and said, like, I've never done category management. I think it would be a great skill to understand and learn so I can understand just like that core part of the business of like,
Yeah.
how do you guys manage your products and weekly promotions and what do you do? And so I ended up taking on a category just to
Mhm.
learn some of those skills, right? And learn like,
Cool.
yeah, it was real. And I mean, gosh, did I learn? Like there are so many
Yeah.
areas and things that touch category management. And so to me, it was like just eye-opening. And again, it was like keep building those tools in the toolkit, right? That I
Yeah.
would have never had as a dietitian
Hmm.
previously. So
I think that's a great one, whether it be through kind of informal job assignments, getting on projects. I had the opportunity, a similar opportunity once. It wasn't really related to my core role to be on like a project team for a new area. And I was working with product development and a lot of different parts of the business. I found that was super valuable.
yeah.
But even considering like moving formally throughout a company and taking on
Yeah.
some of those unique roles that aren't maybe healthcare related, even can really help you, I think, grow in your career. And you always kind of bring that health perspective no matter where you go. And that can actually be really valuable to a company in having,
Yeah.
someone with that interest having a seat at different tables within the organization. So I love that one. That's really cool. Category management is definitely an area I was very intrigued by.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Um, yeah, kind of my last question is there anything that you do on a weekly basis that you find sets you up well for success, kind of either personally or professionally, or something that you do on an annual basis?
Yeah. I mean, weekly, I feel like I'm pretty, maybe it's old school me, but like I've always just been good about and like very keen on my to-do list for the week, right? So I
Yeah,
can like break things down versus looking at it as a whole.
yeah,
So yeah, I feel like weekly, it's like I always start my week of like, okay, what's my to-do list this week? Check in on the status of things I'm currently working on. And
hmm,
then I think the other big one is just like making sure I'm connecting with my peers and my team and
hmm,
seeing what else is going on that week, right? Because
yeah,
as you mentioned, incredibly fast-paced business,
yeah,
constantly pivoting. We have a competitive space where sometimes you think you're going to go into your week knowing what you're
yeah,
prioritizing and it's like nope, drop it, we gotta
hmm,
shift gears and do something else. So I think like not being thrown off by that is like making sure you're going in with that right mindset,
hmm,
figuring out your priorities but also making sure you're connecting with the rest of the business to see where you're
yeah,
gonna work best. um and then annually, like I've always been huge on visualization. So like for me, I always like to do a vision board and
cool.
I love like visually seeing where I want my next year to go. So
Mm,
not that life is in quadrants, but I always like how I've always built mine is I do 4 quadrants. So I do like what are my like career and finance goals? What are my like passions and hobbies? My relationships, and then my health goals. And so
oh,
I
cool.
put pictures up kind of in those 4 quadrants. And I love that visual because I feel like that's
Hmm,
exactly when then at the end of the year you go back
hmm.
to and like you're never going to be in perfect harmony. So
No.
you look and you're like, wow, I like really killed it in this area this year. Or like, wow, I did not like do well or thrive here, but like let's keep those on for next year and
Yeah.
kind of evolve. So like annually, that's kind of my like ritual of like how do I
Mm.
as a whole picture and whole self like set up
Hmm.
my vision for the year to come.
I love that. That's so neat. I love the visual part of it too. I've done them sort of online, and I think I actually need to do them more hands-on. I feel like that could be a fun process. Do you do it like on online or more on a like
No, like literally go get one of
cutout
those
pictures?
boards from like the dollar store and
Awesome.
cut out magazines and like glue them
That's
onto a board.
cool. I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah. That's a great one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, is there anything else you want to share with the audience as we wrap up here?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think really like we covered a lot, but I would just say like for any health professionals that are considering moving into the business world or have thought about it but haven't taken the leap, it's like, I will not sugarcoat that it's like a really uncomfortable path to step onto.
Yeah.
But I think, there's so much potential, and like the potential is
Mhm.
really limitless, right? Of the different areas you can
Mhm.
grow in, but also like all those transferable skills you're going to bring in as a health professional. So, yeah, I would just say, like, honestly, at the end of the day, like, don't sell yourself short. You can
Mhm.
do it. Just like sometimes taking the uncomfortable path is where you're going to see the most growth, right? So, yeah, so I would just leave everyone with that.
Yeah. I love that. That's great advice. Thank you, Raman. So
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed hearing from Raman today and you're feeling a little bit more inspired around a career maybe in retail or another business space. I'll just part with a few closing words. If you do want to engage more with the business skills for health professionals community, I have a free Facebook group. It's called Business Skills for Health Professionals Community, and I'll link that in the show notes below. We also have our Beyond Clinical Career Transition program. It's really there to support you in making a career transition from maybe like a more traditional healthcare role into something unique. And you can learn about that by visiting our website, which is www.bizskillsforhps.com. And you can look under our services. And I'll also link this in the show notes. We have lowered the price of this program until the end of 2023, so it's a good time to check it out. So thank you so much, Raman, and thank you
Thank
everyone for
you.
listening.
Thanks so much.